Okay. Uh, Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I think we'll start now. I think we've got everyone on board. Uh, I'll just take you guys through uh, the decks for the digital mindset sessions, which are going to happen starting next week. This session is a little bit different from the previous ones because, as I'm sure Ambika and Drashti would have told you, is we're going to do them back to back in the sense we're going to do one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And the reason for that is because this is kind of like a single long agenda. So just to make sure that there is some continuity and that sort of stuff, we felt it makes sense to go back to back. It is also expected to help our attendance. So hopefully we'll see bigger numbers in attendance for this session. Right. So I'll just take you through each of the workshops. So I'll start with the first one, which is the one in the morning. So we'll start off with a quick introduction, a recap of what we did last time, and then we kind of jump right into understanding what. Sorry, I have a bit of a bad network there. So yeah, so we'll start off by talking about the digital imperative. Then we'll move on to the customer preferences. So I'll just take you through this when we come to the slide. And then we talk about design of everyday things. So this is an activity. The way it works is you're given like you've broken up into groups and given one product, and you have to basically think about it in the most futuristic way possible. And then people come back and present what they thought of. After the break, we uh, can can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, this is your.
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay. Sorry, which parts did you not hear, Nidhi? Uh, I'll repeat.
I think you came back and you just mentioned that, it
Okay,
wasn't
okay, okay.
so
Okay,
fine.
okay, got it. Got it. ठीक है, ठीक है. Okay. Um, right. After the break, we talk about digital evolution in the banking industry. So here there are a few examples and case studies. Most of it is pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead. And then we get into design thinking, right? So design thinking is like the whole five-step process. Those of you who were involved with this program last time would know that we typically do this in on like 2 consecutive days in a live workshop. This time we're going to do in back-to-back sessions. Um so essentially, we're going to talk a little bit about design thinking, talk to them about what it is, give some examples of how good versus bad design. We're going to play a nice video from GE Healthcare and so on. And then we're going to talk about the design thinking process. And we're going to start off with the first part of that process, which is the whole um, persona building, right? So that's going to take about 30-40 minutes. And then once people have built their personas, we will basically close the session and then we'll have a pretty long lunch break um, for between this and the next session, right? Once you come back to the next session, you basically will start off with group presentations for the persona. So we can even tell them that, if you want, you can work on this during the break if you want to refine it or whatever. Then we'll go to the next phase of design thinking, which is defining the problem statement. We call it how might we statement. Essentially, it's defining the problem statement. Then we come to, so all of these are basically a quick 10 minutes of what to do and then followed by 20-30 minutes of activity, right? So define, we tell them how to make a problem statement and then we ask them to sit and make it. Then for ideate, we give them a few uh, tips on and techniques on how to ideate for about 10 minutes and then we ask them to actually sit and ideate on their problem statement. Then we take a break and then we come back and talk to them about prototyping, talk to them about explaining what is rapid prototyping, how it works, and so on and so forth. And then we kind of go into an activity where they actually, build it themselves. And then we basically end the overall session with a group presentation. Right, so that's the overall flow of the two workshops. So as you can see, it's basically a little bit about digital in general, banking and digital in particular, and then design thinking. Before we get into the actual slides, any questions or any doubts about the flow or what we're doing or anything of that sort? Okay, let's go ahead with the slides then for the first. Right, so all these things will be playing while people are waiting for the session to start. Let's go ahead. Right, so as usual, we'll have an introduction. We'll talk about the agenda. Go ahead. We'll have a quick recap of what we did the last time, which was execution. So here, as usual, just talk about these 4 domains and some of the stuff that we covered last time. You will have your facilitator notes for both of these slides. So this is just a quick recap on execution. Moving on. Yeah, this is a quick Slido interaction on what comes to mind when you hear digital. A lot of people might say things like it's to do with technology, it's to do with smartphones and computers and high tech and that sort of stuff. I think the key takeaway that we need to impart to them is like, digital is more than just technology, and what we're going to do in this in the course of these 2 sessions is really to understand what we really mean when businesses say that they're going digital, and how does it apply in banking, and how does it apply to your lives. Okay, so let's go ahead. All right. Yeah, so essentially we just start by talking about how digital is really impacting everything. So we talk about how it's woven into everything we do in terms of laptops and computers, and everything is on an app these days and so on. In terms of society, and like how much public opinion is really defined by what gets spread on WhatsApp or Twitter or Facebook, and more than traditional media. And of course businesses, because everyone is on email, on Slack, on WhatsApp, on their apps for Salesforce and so on and so forth. So even the way businesses deal with digital and the way employees deal with digital is also changing quite significantly. Moving on. Yeah, so this is from our HC Trends report. Pretty straightforward graph. All it says is that technology always changes very, very fast, and individuals tend to keep track with those changes the fastest out of the lot. Like some new app comes, you'll have individuals getting onto their phones and downloading it and figuring it out. Whereas businesses or public policy takes a lot longer to make those changes and to catch up with those changes in technology, right? And as individuals driving business, or as leaders in business, if we take the initiative, then we can also kind of help quicken this transition for business as well, right? That's the key takeaway you need to give these guys. Next slide. Okay, here we talk about what is digitization versus digitalization. So digitization is all about taking something that was on pen and paper and putting it on an app. That doesn't really simplify the process or anything of that sort. All it does is it transfers the process where you were manually writing it down to where you are manually clicking on an app, or you're manually clicking on a computer. The difference between that and digitalization is where we think about processes as a whole, right? We're not thinking about technology first. We're thinking about how can I make this simpler? How can I make this easier? How can I make this cleaner? And that is the big difference that we need to kind of highlight, to say that we are going to talk about digitalization. We're going to talk about digital mindsets. We are not going to talk about, simply converting pen and paper things into online things. Let's go ahead. right? And then there are a couple of examples of where companies like, who were very, very powerful, who were very large, very profitable, uh, didn't really change fast enough in terms of what uh, what the market wanted, and uh, and and they ended up kind of failing, right? So the prime example is that of like Nokia versus someone like an Apple, which uh, um, which is a classic case of digital Darwinism, where uh, Nokia thought they were pretty much invincible. They had 1 billion customers in 2007, and then the iPhone was launched, and barely 10 years later, Nokia is like nowhere on the scene. Right, so there are a few other examples like this. We'll give that in your facilitator notes. And there's another example of how, like a more positive example of, something like a Fitbit, which has kind of leveraged the fact that uh, how digital has kind of affected the fitness industry as well as the watch industry. And it's kind of combined those two needs and been able to create a product that is very, very successful, right? Like 10 years ago, none of this stuff existed, right? So that's another a good example of where companies are kind of adapting. The point of these earlier two examples is to say that, the reason that companies need to adapt, and the reason that you have these new companies coming up out of nowhere, like Fitbit, and becoming very successful, and you have these old companies which were very successful and suddenly dying, like Nokia, that's happening because customer preferences are changing, right? And then we kind of jump into this section where we talk about what do we mean by changing customer preferences. Uh, and then there are like 6 examples of what customers really want in a digital world, right? So people don't really care too much about owning things, right? They just want access to things, right? So uh, uh, a prime example about cars, right, where very large number of people, especially in places like Bombay and Delhi and big metropolitan cities, are choosing to actually just uh, rent a Zoom car whenever you need it, but you don't really need to go through the hassle of owning your car, maintaining it, parking it, worrying about it getting stolen, and so on and so forth. Uh, Similarly, Flyroom for wardrobes, right? You don't really need to spend that much money on clothes. The second one is about being part of a community. So, like for example, uh, like the reason OnePlus has become so successful is, I mean, of course they make good phones, but also the fact that they have this sense of community, right? So it's not like some of the other uh, phone makers do a worse job. It's just that OnePlus does a really, really good job of building that loyalty and giving that sense of community, right? Where everyone can kind of come together and solve each other's problems and that sort of stuff. And that kind of also ties in with our whole need for social interaction and social media and all that stuff. The third one is like need for um, instant gratification, in terms of, we're very impatient these days, and digital has made us very, very impatient these days. So we want to kind of get a full experience of things absolutely immediately, right? So good example of this is where uh, Dulux kind of had this paint visualizer where they helped you see what your walls and what your this might actually look like with certain colors, and that helped you kind of make a decision on whether you wanted to buy that paint or not. And whereas 10 years ago we would have probably got 3-4 patches of paint done on the walls and then decided which one looks the best, right? But nobody has patience for that anymore. um, Number 4 is a demand for customization. So uh, so Coca-Cola has this thing called Freestyle, which is like a dispenser which you can customize through an app. So even something as classic or as traditionally packaged as Coca-Cola is also something that is people are looking for customizations in. So so this is another, like it's a very big digital change for a company that basically hasn't changed for the last 100 odd years. Um, Number 5 is around social media. So a lot of advertising that happens on TV and newspapers and stuff these days is mostly redundant, because most people get all of their news, all of their information, all of their interaction on like a Facebook or a Twitter or on YouTube, right? So so social media is really something that genuinely influences buying decisions, that genuinely influences customer behavior, and that's not something that we can ignore anymore. Let's move on. And like cross-industry experiences, right? So example of IKEA, like IKEA is famous for having the whole build your furniture yourself thing, where they just send you the unassembled furniture in small boxes and you need to kind of put it together, right? But when they came to India, they realized that this is never going to work, because I mean, Indians don't really it doesn't really work that way in this market. So then you have to think differently, and then you have to kind of adapt to your customer needs and think about what are some cross industry alliances that I can use. And that's where they kind of partnered with Urban Company, because it was a perfect synergy that Urban Company actually sends people over to assemble things for you, and IKEA doesn't have to do anything additional to what they usually do, which is just sell their furniture, right? So the essential point of all of this is to say that customer preferences are changing, customers are changing, and which is why companies are changing, and that change has been very visible in the last 10 to 15 years, right? So with this background, then we go into an activity which is all about thinking about customers, right? So the idea is that you're given one standard everyday item. One group is given a water bottle, one group is given a baby stroller, and essentially you're told that your budget, timelines, nothing is a constraint. Just go as futuristic, as sci-fi as you want, and come back with uh, like the supercharged version of this product. This will happen in your regular breakout rooms, so I won't go into the details of that. But essentially the key thing is that people will come back, and what you need to do during the debrief is to kind of highlight the fact that they're thinking about customers, right? And they're not just adding technology for the sake of it, right? But they're adding features like it. Like, for example, a water bottle will help me track my blood sugar, or help me track how many nutrients I'm taking in, and what are my hydration levels and things like that. They're thinking about this from a point of a customer. It's not just randomly adding features to it, right? So that is the key thing to take away from that debrief. Let's move on. Go ahead. Yeah, so when we're doing the presentation, we'll also have videos of actual products, like actual real life, very high tech versions of these products. So these would again be interesting to see. And you can point out, I'm sure that there'll be some common ideas. So you can point out how, they've also thought of similar ideas as specialists in the field. Generally, it's a feel good thing to kind of end this session on. Let's go ahead. Yeah, I think there's a break after this. Yeah, that's right. Go ahead. Yeah, now we're going to talk about how digital. So far, we talked about digital in general and how customer preferences are changing. Now we're going to talk about digital specifically in the banking industry. Let's go ahead. Right. So when we talk about digital and financial services, what we need to, you kind of need to start inside out. So you say that, look, we talked about customer expectations, and from a financial services perspective, customers want things to be simple. They don't want to fill out long forms. They want you to be there for them. They want to do things very easily. They want the chance to work with good brands. They want personalization. They want to be constantly engaged. They want strong relationships and so on. right? And in addition to that, there's a lot of changes that are happening outside of the industry. So regulatory expectations are getting more and more stringent. Uh, Digital intermediaries are growing more and more popular. You have a lot of fintech companies coming in. Distributed ledger technology or blockchain is getting more and more institutionalized, and some large banks like JP Morgan, etc., are already using these things. Machine learning, predictive analytics is something that's becoming very useful to identify the right kind of customers, to make products, and so on and so forth. Internet of Things, in the sense that, a lot of, like, your phone is connected to your bank, where you make payments for your TV, or you make payments for something else, and so on and so forth. So for each of these things, that there are proper facilitator nodes, but the idea is that you just talk about, look, so many things are changing from a digital perspective in the financial services industry, and therefore these are pretty disruptive forces, and that's why we need to kind of adapt and think differently. Right, so let's go ahead. Yeah, so when you talk about banks, you can talk about, to say that because of all of these changes, here are the three big disruptions that are happening, right? So disruptions are either happening in core operations, they're either happening in channels, or they're happening in terms of business model, right? And then there's a slide each on each of these, where we talk about an example for all of them. So when we talk about core operations, there's a company called Kensho. What that effectively does is uh, they basically use artificial intelligence to solve analytical problems, right? So for example, they are a broking company, like a retail broking company, and what they do is to say that, if Netflix beats earnings, then what's going to happen to Amazon the next day? Or if Apple releases a product, what's going to happen to their share prices the next day, or a week from the release of the product, and so on and so forth, right? So what they're doing is they've kind of completely taken a lot of your fundamental analysis out of the picture, and they're doing a lot of this stuff through artificial intelligence, right? So they're really kind of thinking very differently about investments and trading, which is really catching on, and in fact, Citibank has a tie-up with Kensho, because they're being so successful at what they're doing. Right, so this is one way in which, like, core operations, like your traditional trading desk, has been completely disrupted, and we're thinking about it in a completely new way. Coming to channels, next slide, please. Yeah, channels. We have Kakao Bank, which is it's a Korean bank, and basically they are. So Kakao is essentially like a Korean version of WhatsApp. And what they have done is, when they started their whole payments thing, they were able to kind of leverage the fact that they had such a large customer base already on one channel, which was their chat channel. That when they started the bank, they were able to kind of bring some 10 lakh people on board, like in no time at all, like literally in 1 or 2 days, right? And to put this in perspective, you can say that most banks, right, even the new big institutional banks that come up, typically take at least like a month or two to get to 1 million customers, right? And Kakao Bank literally did that in a matter of days. Similarly, when WhatsApp payment started, like, they onboarded 20 million customers in a day, right? Which is, again, just thinking differently about what channels are available to you, and how you can kind of use digital channels to really bring in customers, right? So that's the example on disruption in terms of channel. On business model, this is what I was talking about, that JP Morgan is using like distributed ledgers and blockchain for this interbank information network. What they're being able to do really by doing this is it kind of really breaks down the process, makes it very simple, very secure. It cuts out a lot of the transaction time and more importantly, cuts out a lot of the transaction cost, because then you don't need people to kind of manage transactions manually in a lot of these places. And because it's blockchain, because it's distributed ledger, and because it's completely secure, you're able to also do it in a much safer way without human error, right? So they're being able to kind of build this into such a successful platform that they are that other banks are now kind of paying JP Morgan to use this platform to make their payments, right? So that's another example of how like a business model itself is being transformed. And JP Morgan, of course, is not a small bank. It's one of the largest banks in the world. So it's not even like we're taking like a small startup and taking that example. It's genuinely one of the biggest banking institutions in the world that is going through a business model shift. And if they can do it, certainly Bank of Baroda can. Right. So then there are like 6 themes that set the basis for digital disruption. There are detailed notes for each of these, but essentially it talks about how in the banking space automation plays a big role, how data is very important, particularly in financial services, how customers want to be empowered and do things on their own. They don't want to come to the bank for everything. They don't want to rubber stamp everything. Customers now want very niche or specialized products, right? Like there are all these things like, loans for like two-wheeler loans for second-hand bikes, like it's those kind of niche specialized things which never really existed before. Customers don't want to go through multiple levels of interactions. They want to reduce intermediaries. And of course, banks as a whole need to really streamline the infrastructure, because you have cards, you have credit cards, you have ATMs, you have net banking, you have cash deposit machines and all sorts of things, and everything needs to kind of be aligned with each other. Otherwise, it's going to be a big mess. Right. So those are the 6 themes that are kind of setting the basis for digital disruption. As I said, there are detailed notes, so don't worry about me kind of rushing through them right now. Then we come to design thinking. Let's go ahead. Right. So we start off with a couple of examples of what people think about as useful, in the sense of like the button on the left, which is all about I need to have every possible feature reflected in my TV remote, right? But then if you really think about which were the ones you really use, it comes down to maybe 5 or 6 buttons, and then you kind of question whether you really need such a complicated remote, such a big this thing which is going to fade and buttons are going to wear out and so on and so forth, or can you just have something far simpler, far easier to understand, far more intuitive, right? And you can give this as an example of designing for product features versus designing for user experience, right? Similarly, as we go ahead, right? So BlackBerry versus Apple. BlackBerry, when it came out, it was like the product in the market. Everybody in business had a BlackBerry, but over time, like BlackBerry solved the problem for their customers at one point in time, but then didn't really evolve since then. And Apple kind of saw that opportunity to say that, do I really need a keypad? Can I increase my screen size? Because people were complaining that I can't see PPTs on this, I can't see videos on this, I can't have my video calls on a BlackBerry, and so on and so forth. So, and Apple now has kind of solved all of those problems, and once again is taking back all of that, whatever little market share BlackBerry had as well, right? So once again, a case of designing for users versus designing for features, right? Similarly, a few more like simple examples of push and pull. Like, do you really need something to hold on to push? You just like it's an easier way to communicate that you need to push this door, right? Rather than putting something written down over there. Next slide. Yeah, so basically we then get into, these are all examples of outcomes of design thinking, right? So basically we talk about what is design thinking, and it's a pretty straightforward definition, but the idea is it's a structured approach you make sure you cover everything. You don't just solve the simple stuff and ignore the difficult parts. Um, you specifically focus on the end user and your customer, and you create solutions, and then you kind of prototype and actually make them useful. Right? It's not just about thinking in the air. Then we go on to the next page about when we can deploy. This is pretty straightforward, self-explanatory. Go ahead. Yeah, so this is an example of design thinking where it's about how GE kind of uh, reinvented or completely redesigned the way they do MRIs, particularly for children. And it's a really nice video. So we'll send all of this to you. Please watch it. Essentially, what you need to point out here in the debrief is that, uh, uh, the way they designed this was by looking at it from a child's perspective. And they like what they came up with as medical device designers and engineers and doctors was drastically different from what they came up with when they kept the children in mind or the customers in mind, right? And that's a very big visible difference, right? So which we can talk through. This is uh, uh, this is like an American video, so you might need to kind of play back some of the messages because in case people don't understand the accent and so on. So just keep a note of that, right? So maybe just ask, did everyone get that, or do you want me to just tell you the story again, kind of thing? And if required, you might need to just repeat this a little bit. Okay, so that was the video. Let's go ahead. Yeah. So you can also use the video to kind of say that, look, this is exactly design thinking. This is what we do, right? First, we empathize, we understand what is the child's problem with the MRI machine. Then we define what exactly is that we're trying to solve for. Then we come up with a lot of ideas. Then we kind of put those ideas in motion and prototype and see what is working. And then once we have a minimum viable product, we test it and perfect it. Right? And that's basically what happens in that video. Let's move on. Okay. Empathize is all about kind of putting the customer at the center and not kind of going the other way around. And essentially, it comes down to persona building. So let's go ahead. Yeah. So there are a couple of examples. I won't go into these in detail, but essentially, it's about Godrej came up with this portable refrigerator, which was very useful for rural areas and especially a lot of these small retailers and sellers. Because their food was going bad, they were making losses and so on. And this was actually something that Godrej partnered with IIT for, where these IIT kids actually went and spoke to the individual users and kind of designed this product specifically for them. So as you can see, it's really light, portable. It also served the purpose of selling in stores and also easy to transport and so on and so forth, right? So let's go ahead. Yeah. So essentially, when we talk about personas, it's all about understanding their perspective, understanding the environment, relationships, and so on, thinking about their motivations, triggers, aspirations, and kind of uncovering what are some of their needs or pain points that we need to solve for. Let's go on. Yeah. Then we get into the activity for creating a persona. Go ahead. Yeah, this is straightforward. Let's go on. Yeah, so you can just quickly touch upon where we use personas. So it's all about creating a unified view, having a model customer, providing a single source of truth, and so on and so forth. So that once you have that ready, then everything else kind of flows from there, right? Let's go on. Okay. Sorry, on the previous page, like when we talk about what is important about personas, it's also important. That last point is really important. Creating a common language and way of thinking about customers. So here you can give an example that, if, like for example, if I think of uh, someone old, I might think of someone who's 80 years old, whereas if someone else thinks of someone old, they might think of someone who's 60 years old. Someone else might think of someone old as 40 years old. So uh, it's all of these are like subjective descriptors, right? So when you actually build a persona, you go into much more detail than that, and therefore it becomes a very precise way to segment your customers, and very precise way to think about uh, which brackets they actually fall into. Okay, let's move on now. Yeah. Okay, activity essentially you will it'll break out rooms, and each group will be assigned one persona, and the idea is you have to kind of detail out that persona, right? So if you just go to the page that they have to fill out. Yeah, so we are giving a couple of personas. So uh, these personas might change, right? But the idea is uh, basically one group picks up one persona, the other group picks up another persona, and then they kind of detail out that persona, right? So which personas are actually there in your particular cohort is not very important, but just letting you know that these things might change over time. Like in one cohort you might have HNI, in the other cohort you might have rural worker, right? So don't be too alarmed by that. Um, let's go to the actual activity. Yeah. Right. So essentially, this is what they're going to fill out, right? They're going to get a template like this, and they have to fill it out. In terms of, you have to give your persona a name and age. You have to create like a fictional this thing around what is their education, where do they live, what are their personality traits, interests, experiences, tasks, so on and so forth. Right. So you can show this as an example to say that, look, this is the level of detail you need to go into when you build your persona. And with persona, I mean, one common doubt that we often get is like, do we need to base it on a real person, right? The answer is no. You need to kind of uh, think about generic 65-year-olds that you might have interacted with in your life, and then kind of build out this persona that broadly makes sense for them, right? So what is your impression of a 65-year-old, a normal customer of the bank who would be 65 years old, right? That's what you need to kind of try to define, right? And the rest of it is more to just give it color and to help you kind of visualize that as a real person. Okay. Then we go into our breakouts, and then people fill out uh, their personas, and then we end the session over there. Okay. Any questions before I get into the next part of the next session of the workshop?
Aditya, to what extent are we going to guide them when they're filling out their personas?
So you can help them along. I mean, you can guide them, you can give them suggestions. That's fine. Uh,
Okay, all right.
so I mean, unlike mimic tools and stuff, it's not something that they need to fill from their own this thing. You can also contribute your own ideas. So that's all right. If you find them struggling, you can start off by giving a few ideas and then ask them for similar ideas, and that sort of stuff is fine as well.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's go to the next session. Okay. So the next session, we start off with the persona presentation, where everyone kind of talks about their two personas in a fair bit of detail. Um, uh, Over here, just give them some feedback, or just tell them that, if they've over-indexed on like pains or over-indexed on something else, you can just point them to say that, you need a more rounded persona, that sort of stuff. Other than that, there won't be much to cover in this presentation. Okay, let's go ahead. Okay, then we get on to the next 3-4 phases. So define is basically all about figuring out the problem statement. So let's go on. Right. So uh, we give, like, this is a standard example that we give, like, how do we make ice cream better, right? And um, the the thing is, when you ask a question like how do you make ice cream better, people will come up with all sorts of different answers, right? So you can actually ask this question to the group, and some might say that ice cream is too cold, or ice cream melts too quickly, or it doesn't have enough flavor, or it has too much flavor, right? So you might have very different reactions to the question, how do you make ice cream better, right? And that's why it's important to get the right problem statement so that you're solving the right problem, right? So these are a few uh, examples. Like the just right statement, as you can see, is pretty specific. It says, how can we redesign ice cream to be more portable so that people can enjoy it for a longer time in a less messy way? So we are not trying to solve for things like taste, or we are not trying to completely rethink about ice cream as a concept itself, but we are trying to solve a very specific problem. And this is what we need to push them towards, right? Let's go on. Okay, this is like a template how might we statement. So it basically says how might we, what is the method, what do you want to change, what is the output you're trying to change, who are the stakeholders involved, what is the purpose, and are there any qualifiers or metrics, right? So what we're going to now do with these guys is to send them into groups again and say that now that you have your persona that is built out, you need to build a how might we statement. Like, what is the problem statement? What do you want to do for them as a value proposition, right? So yes, these are a few tips on how to write a good how might we statement. Let's go ahead. Yeah, the activity is essentially you kind of go back to your persona, you think about the pain points and the needs, and you define a statement, right? It's pretty straightforward. The big discussion mostly happens around, uh, you know, which of the pain points do we address, or which of the pain points are common, or uh, what are the needs that are really is the problem worth solving, right? And another thing you can tell them is that, look, you have to think about this as bankers, right? You need to think about these guys as your customers, right? So uh, somewhere in the back of your mind, when you're thinking of problem statements, you also need to think about banking related problems or something that you can solve as a banker, right? So not something completely uh, wild or out there, but something to kind of think about in the banking context as a banking customer. What can you do for these guys? Okay, let's move on. Okay. So here you just kind of keep that template in front of you when they're presenting, and just point out if they've stuck or missed the template for how might we state, which is unlikely they'll miss because you'll be there guiding them through the activity. But anyway, let's go ahead. Okay, ideate again, a very quick session. So here you just give some guidelines that, don't judge people, come up with as many ideas as you want, stay focused, come up with as many ideas as possible. Don't think about, oh, this is a good idea or a bad idea. Just first come up with the ideas and then kind of evaluate them and so on. Right. The next we go into a easy technique to do it. So it's something called Crazy 8. The idea is that you have to come up with 8 solutions or 8 ideas for your problem statement in 8 minutes. Right. And this is something that really pushes people, because after like 1 or 2 minutes, it becomes really hard to think of a new idea. So here, when you go into the activity, let's go there. Yeah, so the idea for why we want them to come up with so many ideas is, if first you think divergently, get as many things on the table, and then you kind of do convergent thinking and prioritize and decide your best 3-4 ideas. Right? Can we go to the activity slide? Right. Yeah. Okay. So the idea is we get all of these people to in 8 minutes come up with as many ideas as possible. Basically, what you need to do when you're conducting this is you would have someone with you who would kind of time them to say that, okay, 1 minute over, 2 minutes over, 3 minutes over, and so on. So to just put a bit of pressure on them to get as many ideas out. Once 8 minutes are done, what you need to do is to say, okay, fine, now prioritize your top 3 or top 5 ideas. And then once we go into prototyping, you can decide which are the best ones that you want to take into prototyping. Right, so that is the outcome of these ideas. Let's go ahead. Okay, and then people just come back and present their top 5 ideas. Okay, not every single idea, but just their top 5 ideas. Okay, let's move on. Okay, prototyping. This is, I think, the most important part of this section. So let's go ahead. Okay, so here you kind of explain what is rapid prototyping, where you basically try to very quickly kind of try to get a tangible experience of what you're trying to build. That's the short definition. And for the rest of it, you would have facilitator notes. Let's move on. Okay, and there are various kinds of rapid prototyping. So this is not very important. You can just, like it can be a simple service blueprint. It can be like actual props and this thing, or it can be a full-blown mock-up of something. This is not very critical. You can, if you're short for time, you can even skip that slide. Okay, so this is the story of Google Glass, and it's a really nice video about prototyping and how they kind of prototyped Google Glass. Here, in fact, before playing the video, one thing you should do is to ask, how long do you think it took to prototype Google Glass? And many a times what we get is answers like 6 months or a year and things like that, whereas the actual answer is like a day or a week or something like that. It's a really short time frame, right? And then you kind of go into this video to show how they did it. Okay, let's go ahead. Yeah, so okay, sorry. Okay, before we get into the activity, so the debrief of that video, right, is Ambika Drishti, I think we need to add like a slide with a debrief of that video. Is that prototyping, firstly, you don't need anything fancy. It's basic everyday stuff that is around you. Two, it doesn't have to be perfect. Everything is it just has to give you a good enough understanding of whether this works or this doesn't work. And he gives an example of how they tested the motion sensing thing and where they had to wave their hands to move things around on Google Glass. And then they realized that, while as a technology, it'll work, but if you're walking down the street waving your hand, it's dangerous because you might hit somebody, you might hit your hand on a moving car or something of that sort, right? So that's another thing you can highlight, that, prototyping is not just about coming up with things and making things work, but it's also about understanding in the real world what will not work. But yeah, we'll add a slide on the debrief of this video and we'll give you some notes on that as well. Okay, coming to the activity, this is like important. So the idea is that they need to build some kind of a digital product, right? Here we've said you need to build an app, and as much as possible ask them to build an app only. But if someone says that, an app doesn't make sense and can I build a website instead and all that, that's fine. I mean, it's okay for them to do that. The idea is to take your top 3 or 5 ideas that you came up with in the ideation phase. Choose the one idea that you feel makes most sense as a digital product and design it, right? So in terms of actually building the screens up and so on, right? Let's move on in terms of what they're actually going to be doing. Okay. So Ambika Drishti, what what are the templates that they're going to be filling out? Is it those app design, or have you made anything else for them to fill out?
So, Aditya, we've decided to use another tool rather than using Glaxoon, because that's not very user friendly when it comes to trying to copy paste symbols or things
Okay.
like that.
Fine.
Having said
Can you just take everyone through that, please? Because this is like really important. Prototyping is like the main part of this session. The rest of it is pretty straightforward.
Sure, Bhuvan, can I request you to present that piece, please?
Yeah. Just give me a minute. I'll just pull that up.
Like we always have for Glaxoon, we will have someone from our team presenting that and actually working on it while we get inputs from the breakout team or from the main group team.
Right. So while Bhuvan brings that up, any questions on the flow of the deck so far? I think let's just go. Okay. So just a second, Bhuvan. Anyone has any questions on the flow of the deck or any of the content in the deck? Because this will take some time. Okay. If you do have any questions, just reach out to me directly or to Ambika or Drashti, and we'll definitely get back to you. And we'll share across the decks with the facilitator notes and all of that. And now Bhuvan and Drashti will take you through this, how we plan to run this activity.
So
thanks.
basically,
Yeah. Go
yeah.
ahead, Drashti.
Yeah, so just so what you see on your screen is Mural, which is the app that we're going to be using. And just so that participants get an idea as to, how an app could look like, or, how over the level of output that we're expecting from them, we will first show them like a screen which, has the Bank of Baroda app. And, so like, so something, so the Bank of Baroda logo, and it says Baroda M Connect, which is their online portal. So this piece just gives them an idea as to, the kind of look and feel they will be able to create. So they'll be able to use different colors, different logos. They'll be able to change the color of the font, things like that. And then there will be a blank template like the one Bhuvan just pasted. And that is where you can ask the participants from your group to start giving inputs. And whoever's presenting from the end of our team will start taking them. We will also show them the options on the left-hand side. If you see, that's where you have all the different options in terms of the icons. So, you can nudge the participants. So if they say that, we want to put an icon of a book, okay, we can very well go ahead and search that for them. The basic icons are there, but there's a search facility also. So we can do our best to build something that looks visually appealing and actually serves the purpose of, the entire activity that, we are doing. And Bhuvan is much more conversant on Mural than what I am. So Bhuvan, anything that I've missed from over here, please feel free to chip in.
Yeah. No, I think that mainly covered it. But yes, we are able to add images or like Drashti mentioned, icons as well. So, but otherwise, all the basic functionalities of just kind of designing it, designing like a screen of how a screen would appear. So we would tell them that maybe take this time to design 3 or 4 screens at the max, and kind of detail those out as to what you would like the user to kind of go through. So it should be a linked at the core idea of what the problem statement they've made and all the ideas that they have. So all of those ideas, they should be kind of putting them here with respect to whatever they come up with in the previous activities. And we'll try our best to kind of have it in a like a aesthetic design manner as and when they keep giving their ideas and inputs.
Aditya, I think that's supposedly it on the actual designing of the app bit.
So this prototyping activity is for how long? What's the duration of this?
as per the session plan?
We have about 45 to 50 minutes at least, and we've accounted for a certain buffer. Yeah.
Right. Great.
Yes. So we've tried to keep the second part. We've tried to keep this as the most like the longest part of the session to kind of dedicate it to this bit, because they will take some time to warm up and start.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. That was my concern, that they anyway, take time to open up, and we've had batches where only one or two people, end up voicing or participating, and the others are keeping quiet. So a lot of time goes in just cajoling them, So so 40 to 45 minutes is a good time, therefore, for this kind of an activity.
Any other questions on the activity bit, on the prototyping bit?
I think as of now, none. Once we go through the facilitator notes and sort of, run it through our minds once, there might be some questions. Nothing as of now for me.
Sure. All right.
By when can we expect to get the deck? Because this might require, unlike the other ones, a little longer time to familiarize ourselves as well.
Nidhi will send it right away after the call.
Oh, all right, brilliant.
Yeah.
Also, just a correction, sorry, we'll have about 60 to 75 minutes for the activity, not 45, sorry.
Okay, all right, even better.
Aditya, is there anything else? Otherwise, I think we can end the call.
No, nothing else.